Hi, my name is Joe Conlon, and I'm the Technical Advisor of the American Mosquito Control Association. Today we're going to have a brief discussion on integrated mosquito management. More importantly, we're going to discuss what it is and indeed what it isn't. There's a lot of discussion today about integrated mosquito management as being a kind of a contemporary concept that we've learned how to do this. Fact is, though, it's a very old concept in mosquito control. It was actually first proposed in 1871 by Dr. Albert Freeman Africanus King. So it's an old, integrated mosquito management has a number of principles under which it operates. The first of these is that it is knowledge-based. You have to have a profound knowledge of the biology of the target pests that you're trying to eliminate or control. It's surveillance-driven. Once you have this knowledge, you can actually use survey tools to find out where your pest is, where your mosquito is, where it is not, at what the population levels are, whether you really need to control them or not. So it's surveillance driven, and you don't do any intervention strategies until surveillance tells you you need to. And it's resource limited. Costs a lot of money to do integrated mosquito management properly. Not all mosquito abatement districts have this amount of money to do the whole program. So what they need to do is pick and choose what works for them. Now, knowledge base. There are 174 species of mosquitoes in the United States. All of them have the same basic life cycle. They go from egg to larvae to pupae to adult. They all need water. They all have different feeding proclivities. They have different egg-laying patterns that they use. They use different habitats. They've got peak activity times and flight ranges that are different. But by and large, there's quite a bit of overlap in them. But you have to know where it overlaps and where it is distinctive for each species in order to effectively and efficiently target your control methodologies. Now, in this case, this is dredge spoil, and you've got trillions, literally trillions of mosquito larvae here. Now, if you know about the mosquitoes in your area, you know this is where you're going to have to look for these mosquitoes. Now, you're not going to be able to eliminate the dredge spoil, but you can look for where they are, and you can actually treat this before it gets to this level here, okay? So if you know that biology, it'll help you to effectively target those mosquitoes. Here is some salt marsh just south of Savannah, Georgia, and you see these dark patches here. These are not shadows. These are actually mosquito larvae, millions and millions of mosquito larvae. Here where knowledge fits in is that you know these things breed in salt marshes, but they only breed in certain places in salt marshes at certain times of the year because they utilize the spring tides that flood areas that are not normally flooded. And then these things come out. So you can actually predict this in advance and prepare for it in order to get rid of these mosquitoes. Here again, knowledge is the key. Some mosquitoes like to breed in containers. These are particularly difficult mosquitoes to deal with because people are creating this problem. But they like to breed in these small areas here, swimming pools like that, jars, air conditioning drip pans. I've seen them breeding in discarded soda bottle caps. When we tell people to eliminate the standing water in containers in your yard, you have to be very fastidious about that because they will breed in literally just about anything. These are particularly bad because we are creating this habitat and they tend to breed right next door to us, so we're the first thing on the menu to them when they come out as adults to feed. So we really need to get rid of these. Now, we need to know about the peak activity of these mosquitoes. When are they most active? And that's for a couple reasons. First of all, when you know the peak activity times for these mosquitoes, you can tell the public this is the time you need to stay indoors. You don't need to stay indoors 24 hours a day, but this is the peak activity times. This also will tell you when these are flying around. Like the Ocleritatus species are flying around at night, primarily between 5 and 8 p.m. That's the time when you get out. If you're going to do adulticiding, you need to get out there and do it at that particular time because that's when they're flying around. Now, all of these mosquitoes that we have here will feed at dawn and dusk. Okay, they are found at that particular time, and that's one of the reasons why we tell people to stay in during the dawn and dusk times if at all possible. But their peak biting times can be significantly different. Flight ranges. This is extremely important. Mosquitoes, depending upon the species, can fly considerable distances from where they lay their eggs. 40 to 70 miles in the case of these mosquitoes. Remember the balls of mosquitoes I showed you? That species flies 40 to 70 miles for a meal. some of them 5 to 20 miles. But the fact is, where this fits in is that people will call me up and say, how do I get rid of the mosquitoes in my yard? And I say, well, there are certain things you can do to get rid of the mosquitoes in your yard, but they're going to keep coming back in because they're breeding elsewhere. They're laying eggs elsewhere. And a mosquito abatement district countywide has to take that into consideration, the flight ranges of these things. They may be coming in from outside the county, and you have to deal with them. Okay, the second principle is surveillance driven. This is extremely important. All control is governed by surveys. Surveys, depending upon what results you get from a survey, that tells you whether there is a need to do anything. And you shouldn't do anything if there's not a need demonstrated for it. And these surveys can be, and we're going to talk about some of the specific ways you do it, but it could be, amount of complaints that come in per day. You may go from 5 to 20. If it goes from 5 to 20, you may have an issue. That's something you need to figure out. But you don't do anything until those surveys tell you something needs to be done. And this is extremely important, something we've learned over the years. Spray operations should never be done on a scheduled basis, ever. The only reason they should be done is if a survey has indicated a need for it, because doing it on a recurring basis is needlessly putting out pesticide in the environment, and you're courting resistance at that point. We don't want that to happen. So, surveillance-driven intervention thresholds. When I talk about surveys, I'm talking about you need to find out whether the mosquito population is something you need to deal with. Well, it's based upon a whole bunch of different things. Okay, historical tolerance. I've been in places in South America where the mosquitoes are so numerous, it's incredible, and it doesn't bother the people there at all. So they wouldn't do any type of control. Here in the United States, we would. So it's historical tolerance of the population for mosquitoes, and each place will do it differently. There is no national standard for survey results that will tell you need to do intervention at this point. There's no standard. It's based upon local results. You got political considerations that figure into whether you're going to do any type of intervention. Disease transmission history and potential. If you're in an area that's historically got eastern equine encephalitis, your thresholds may be a lot lower, so that if you get a few Culicida melanura in a trap, you're going to spray right away. If you don't have eastern equine encephalitis, that may be different in your case. Okay, so a lot of these things, resistance situation. Here again, if you've got resistance to pesticides in your population, this may increase or decrease the threshold as spraying or tell you to do something else in terms of an intervention strategy. Resource limited. Requires a lot of money, generally funded locally by taxing, special taxing districts and things of that nature. It takes specialized equipment to do this in terms of surveying and in terms of controlling the mosquitoes, and personnel have to be specifically trained in order to have that knowledge base that you need in order to exercise integrated mosquito management properly. So it's resource limited. Not all mosquito abatement districts have these, okay? So we know the basic principles involved. Let's talk about the elements. What actually is an integrated mosquito management program? First of all, you've got public education and community involvement. You need to get the public involved, okay? You need to tell them how to wear repellents. You need to tell them what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it. They need this information, and they should have this information, and you should be most willing to give it to them. Another element of a mosquito management program is source reduction. Get rid of the mosquitoes, the places where they breed, if you can. Sometimes you can't, but if you can, get rid of those, and then the problem solves itself. And we're going to talk about larvae, the surveillance and control of them, and the adults and surveillance and control of them. These are the elements. So, public education, community involvement can take a number of different forms. Students and interns. Oftentimes mosquito abatement districts during the summer, when mosquito season is in full swing, will have students and interns come and help them out. And indeed, a lot of our mosquito control personnel make this a career from that. It's fascinating stuff, and they love it. Schools. We go out to schools and do some education there for kids in terms of what mosquitoes are, what they do, how you can control them, how you can keep them from away from your house, and some youth programs, YMCA. I've done a lot of work with the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and things like this. So get the community involved with your program. Without their support, you probably shouldn't be doing what you're doing. Once you've got the community involved, then you can look at source reduction modification. Remember I talked about source reduction. It's get rid of the problem at its root. Then you don't have to do all this other stuff. That's easy to say, not always available to do. If you're living next to a national wildlife refuge, you can't get rid of the refuge if it's producing mosquitoes. But there are cases in which you can lower the potential for mosquitoes. Here you've got ditching, and these ditches here allow mosquito fish to get in to feed upon the larvae that are trapped in these things, that would otherwise be trapped in these things. And if you can get rid of these things just by ditching, and that's done throughout the country, that's an excellent way of reducing the issue. Here you got a small pond next to a mall, houses, and here you can modify the source of mosquitoes by getting rid of all of the vegetation around here where the mosquitoes, after if they're breeding, they come out and they will rest in here, and getting rid of the emergent vegetation in there, which is hiding the larvae from the fish and some of the other diticid beetles and indigenous predators there. So if you modify this habitat, you can easily get rid of the problem. Here's a huge problem nationwide. Waste tires. They breed enormous numbers of mosquitoes, and these particular types of mosquitoes that breed in these tires like to feed upon humans. Okay, so if you've got this type of issue, you're just asking for trouble. And they're extremely difficult to get rid of because a lot of them are breeding, 5 feet down in this tire pile, and you can't get pesticide to them. So the best way to do it is to eliminate. Get tire elimination programs where they either burn them or they make them into road grade, stuff like that. This is a problem nationwide, though. So let's talk about you've done all you can to reduce the amount of habitats that you have, but you still need to find out where you've got mosquitoes coming out. And that's what these gentlemen are doing here, and they're utilizing a standard method by using a dipper. What you do is you lower that dipper into the water flows in, and you see whether there are any mosquito larvae or pupae in it. And this provides a standardization because everybody uses the same size dipper. Okay, and if you use that, you can do this weeks at a time and just watch mosquito populations go up and down that way. But it's a good way to standardize your methods of larval surveillance. And here's what generally you'll come up with. And the mosquitoes that you find in here can tell us a lot about what's going on. First of all, you got a pupa right there. That means you've got some of them in there that are getting ready to become adults, so you better deal with it now. And you take care of mosquitoes pupae differently than you take care of mosquito larvae in general. And you've got a number of different stages here. Some that are on their way to becoming a pupa, some fourth instar larvae here, and some newlyweds. So these things can tell you a whole lot. Plus, you bring these into the lab, you can find out what species you've got, which tells you what? Tells you something about peak activity period, tells you about the flight range, and will tell you on the methodologies that you can use to control them. This is mosquito dipping larval surveillance. And this surveillance, as I said, is essential so that you can efficiently and effectively target your mosquito larvae. Here you've got 712 acres of salt marsh, and you've got a person here who is actually doing the dipping there throughout this area looking for larvae. In this particular instance, out of the 712 acres, they found 235 acres that actually had larvae in it. So they treated the 235 acres rather than the 712, which would have cost an enormous amount of money and caused some ecological issues that didn't have to come about. So surveillance can help you target your control. There are other controls that you have for mosquitoes, larvae, predators, fish. A lot of the small fish will keep, if they can have access to the mosquitoes, will do exactly what this gentleman here is going to be doing to that mosquito and feed upon it. And in many cases, entire county programs utilize not this exclusively as a control, but it's an integral part of their program. Not all situations with larvae are able to be met successfully with these particular types of fish, though, because they're voracious predators, and you've really got to be careful about where you put these things, because once they get through eating your mosquito larvae, they'll start eating fish fry and things, and you can really ruin a game fish pond if you put these things in it and stock too much. So you've got to be very, very careful. But they're efficient predators, and we should encourage them to remain so. Oftentimes, though, a lot of our predators are not going to work to the extent that we want them to, and we have to utilize larvicides. All of these larvicides, the microbials and the chemicals, have all been fully vetted and researched by EPA as a condition of their registration, to make sure that when these things are put in water and utilized in water, and they're specifically formulated to do that, that they're not going to cause undue harm to the environment. And they're specifically formulated to target mosquitoes. We don't want to kill other things in the environment. We want to kill mosquitoes. But sometimes we have to utilize these. So let's get to adults. There's many ways of surveying for adults. The old method is to just have someone stand out and let mosquitoes land upon them. Of course, this is unsatisfactory when you've got an imminent disease transmission scenario. But you can determine that, mosquitoes are an issue if you've got a situation something like this. But it's generally not used very much anymore. There are certain traps, here again, utilizing the knowledge of the biology of your mosquito, that can be used to capture them, to monitor the mosquito populations. One of these is a New Jersey light trap. As you can imagine, it was developed in New Jersey, and it just takes the mosquito's proclivity for going towards light and utilizes that against them. You hang these things out, and a mosquito will come towards the light, that's why it's called a light trap, and get sucked into a chamber where you can take it from there and take it and identify it and count the number of mosquitoes. These are generally hardwired to a place, so they stay stationary in one spot. There are other mosquito traps that utilize other things in the biology of the mosquitoes against them. Carbon dioxide baited light trap. Here again, it's using light, but it's being baited with carbon dioxide, in this case dry ice, to mimic human exhalation, so that the mosquitoes are definitely attracted to that. And here again, they get sucked up into this capture chamber. We've got a gravid trap here who utilizes somewhat the same thing, but it's utilizing it's making an artificial place for the mosquitoes to lay eggs. And a mosquito that is fed will lay its eggs here, and after she lays her eggs, or even before she's laid her eggs, she gets sucked up into this capture cage here. These are particularly good for when you're trying to find out whether mosquitoes are carrying disease or not, because this one is fed already. If it's fed on a bird that's got encephalitis, may have it, and you take it in that capture bag there and have it tested for virus. So these are quite useful in surveillance for disease. Now, once you've gotten mosquitoes and you found out through your monitoring over a period of time whether your population is going up or down, if it has exceeded the threshold, you're going to end up having to deal with adulticides. Okay? You've got mosquitoes out there. Doesn't matter how much larvicide you're putting out, you've already got adults out there. And particularly in the case of a disease scenario, you need to take care of the adults first. A ways back, we used to use thermal fogs, and it just combusted the pesticide along with a fuel oil additive, and it produced this huge fog like this. These are generally not used anymore in the United States. You can find handheld ones, but big trucks generally not used for a number of different reasons. The logistics issue of having to have fuel oil in addition to the pesticide. You had to use specific formulations of pesticide to be combusted in this. And the fact is this huge cloud would come out, and if you're driving down a road, it's making that road impassable for everybody. You don't want to cause accidents. So this is generally not used anymore. A relatively new concept is putting out what is called a residual barrier. That's putting out a barrier of pesticide, as this gentleman is doing here, say in shrubbery, trees and things surrounding a person's yard. And the residual means that the pesticide stays active for an extended length of time. And when the mosquitoes come and land in here in order to rest, they're going to come in contact with a lethal amount of pesticide. Unfortunately, anything that comes and lands on this may absorb a lethal amount of pesticide. So you're going to have some non-target issues with this. This concept generally isn't used by mosquito abatement districts nowadays, but a lot of the pest control operators out there that are getting involved in mosquito control do this quite a bit. They utilize these barriers quite a bit, and there is some evidence that it can help in keeping mosquitoes down in the yard. What mosquito abatement districts do use is what is called ultra-low volume spraying. Very unique concept. It's called ultra-low volume because you're using minute amounts of pesticide in order to control the mosquitoes. And what they're doing is taking this technical grade insecticide and breaking it up into incredibly small droplets, 30 microns, whereas about 10 million of these could fit inside of a BB shot. That's how small they are. And when these are released into the environment, they drift through an area, above the ground and contact the mosquitoes and knock them out. It requires a great deal of technology, a great deal of expertise, but it's extremely effective when done properly. And it can be done a number of different ways. You've got a truck-mounted ULV. You can do several hundred acres a night with something like this. Or you can do it by helicopter, which you can do several thousand, 4,000, 5,000 acres a night. Or you can do it by some of the fixed-wing assets, and you're talking upwards, 100,000 acres a night. This is very, very important. If you've got a disease situation going on, you need to cover as much territory as possible. So oftentimes when you've got diseases going on, if you can get a hold of these types of assets, this is the way to do it, because wide area control is the way to go when you've got diseases. It's extremely important as part of any integrated mosquito management program that you test whether you're actually doing what you think you're doing, whether it's working, for a number of reasons. You may have resistance issues, and you're going to need to do bottle bioassays to find out whether the mosquitoes are actually getting killed by the stuff you're putting out. If you're doing your surveys and you're finding out that despite the fact that you're doing everything possible via adulticiding to kill these mosquitoes and populations are still going up, it's one of two things. They're resistant, or your technique is bad, You're just not getting the right droplet size, or there's a number of different factors in there. But you have to do this to find out whether what you're doing is working. You don't want to just be putting out pesticide in the environment without it doing its intended job. So there are ways to test for efficacy to see what you're doing. Bees. And here I'm talking about bees and non-target organisms. We do not want to kill non-target organisms. We're out there to reduce populations of mosquitoes. So it's important that you maintain a liaison, an ongoing liaison with beekeepers. Now, by and large, our pesticides aren't affecting the bees because we're letting them out at night where the bees are back in their hives. But it's important that the mosquito abatement district get in touch with beekeepers and say, we're going to spray such and such night. Mosquito populations are blooming. Our surveys say we need to do something. And we'll tell them, and the beekeepers will cover their hives as an extra added measure of protection. Or in addition to that, we've got an aerial spray that's going through this area here. These beekeepers here have been notified, so the people just cut off the spray as they're going over there, and therefore are not exposing the bees to anything. This is very, very important. Again, we're here to protect the public health, kill mosquitoes. We're not out here to harm the environment. So, we've talked about a number of elements of mosquito control, integrated mosquito management, and these are what it is. Public education, source reduction when possible, surveying for larvae, and if the need arises, control the larvae. We've got a number of different methods of doing that. We've got adult mosquitoes. If you're not killing all the larvae, or you've got migration inwards from elsewhere, you're going to have to do survey to find out whether that's indeed happening. And indeed, if it is, you might have to institute control measures. It's important, though, that we remember what integrated mosquito management is not. It does not seek eradication of the mosquitoes. We're not out to eradicate. We're not out to exterminate mosquitoes. What we are out to do is manage them to tolerable levels, whatever those tolerable levels mean in terms of disease transmission, nuisance levels, or what. That's what it means. We're not seeking eradication. It would cost too much, both ecologically and monetarily. And this is also extremely important. It is not pesticide averse, meaning its goal is not to eliminate the use of pesticides. That is not the goal of integrated mosquito management. Now, if we're utilizing all of the elements that I talked about, generally you do utilize less pesticide, but that's not the goal. That's just a good outcome of it. Our goal is to control the pest with minimal environmental damage. Okay? That is the goal. So it's not pesticide averse. And unless circumstances dictate, and circumstances, depending upon where you are, can be extremely different in different areas of the country, you don't solely rely on source reduction, the use of microbial larvicides or chemical larvicides, adulticides, traps, repellents, or natural predators. The term integrated mosquito management means you utilize all of these where appropriate to exploit the vulnerabilities of the critter. So you generally don't use sole reliance. People who want to utilize predators, just put in a million different predators, we're going to take care of the mosquitoes. No, it's not going to work. And that's not true integrated mosquito management. In this case, natural predators oftentimes just aren't getting the job done. Think about it. We wouldn't have mosquito control if natural predators did the work. And it's the amount of prey that control the amount of predators, not the reverse, ecologically speaking. Take for granted dragonflies. A lot of people will tell me, all we need to do is put in dragonflies and that'll solve the problem. Well, dragonflies will eat mosquitoes. Not a whole lot, because dragonflies are daylight predators. And they eat lots of other things. They eat other dragonflies. Okay, their nymphs eat fish that prey on mosquitoes and diticid beetles that prey on mosquitoes. They eat pollinators like bees. They eat butterflies. So, they're part of the food chain, but you don't want to overload them in there or you're going to have some problems that you didn't think about. They're also they generally, as nymphs, like to inhabit permanent ponds and things of that nature, whereas mosquitoes tend to favor, not always, but tend to favor these temporary pools. Okay, these things also, as nymphs, are bottom feeders. Okay, they don't feed up at the top where the mosquito larvae are. The only time they come in contact with mosquito larvae is if someone scares a mosquito larvae and they dive down to the bottom. So, whereas we're not going to discourage dragonflies, don't try and use them as your sole measure of mosquito control. It's not going to work. Same thing with purple martins and bats, birds and bats. They're often touted as the answer to mosquito control in terms of integrated mosquito management. And whereas we shouldn't discourage them, we should encourage them being ecological creatures and beautiful creatures in their own right, their feeding habits do not lend them to be good mosquito control adjuncts either. Purple martins, for instance, are daylight feeders, and they feed at treetop level. You're not going to find mosquitoes during the daylight at treetop level. So you're not going to, these are not going to help. Now, will they eat mosquitoes? Yeah, if they come in contact with them, but they're not going to use that as their sole source of food. Same thing with bats. Bats can and will eat mosquitoes, but they're going to prefer to eat June bugs, moths, things of that. Something that provides more energy for energy expended. Okay. Now, in terms of natural predators, if you want to see how natural predators really work, there's a trap, a light trap, one of those not New Jersey, CDC CO2 baited light traps that I showed you, on the edge of the Everglades. We do not use pesticides in the Everglades. We're prohibited from doing so, and rightfully so. But this is what you're going to get in a trap, often in a single location, and in this case it was a single location. This is what you're going to get in a trap coming off the Everglades, where natural predators are the only forms of control. This particular one here had almost 1.5 pounds of mosquitoes in it. Now you're talking 1,500,000 mosquitoes out of one trap in one area. If you had been standing where this trap was, guess how many of those would be feeding on you? 1,500,000 mosquitoes. Why? Because the natural predators aren't taking care of the problem. Okay? Just wanted to put that in your mind. So, we've talked about the principles underlying integrated mosquito management. We've talked about the elements of a mosquito management program. This is the proper definition of an integrated mosquito management program. It's a comprehensive prevention and control strategy that utilizes available mosquito control methods singly, sometimes. As I said, you don't rely solely on these things, but there are circumstances in which you can get rid of the problem by source reduction alone, or in combination. Generally, you're utilizing a lot of them, that's the integrated portion of it, to exploit the known vulnerabilities of mosquitoes in order to reduce their numbers to tolerable levels, okay? Not eradicating them, while maintaining a quality environment. There are costs involved. Okay, so that's what integrated mosquito management is. If you have any questions about integrated mosquito management, or indeed anything about mosquitoes, please contact the American Mosquito Control Association at their website, www.mosquito.org, or you can email them at amca.mosquito.org. Or if you want information from a source like myself, please contact me, Joe Conlon, the technical advisor, and you can contact me at this email, conlonamcata@gmail.com, or you can call me directly. We'll talk at length about your particular problem at 904-215-3008. Hope this has been instructive to you, and I wish you all well.